The 9th Democratic debate in Las Vegas, Nevada, will be the last debate amongst the primary competitors prior to the Nevada Caucus. The event will be hosted by NBC News and MSNBC in partnership with the Nevada Independent. 5 candidates have qualified so far: Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, and Amy Klobuchar. Having met 3 out of the 4 qualifying polls necessary to be included, Michael Bloomberg is also highly likely to appear in this debate. Tulsi Gabbard and Tom Steyer are not expected to meet the necessary thresholds. Andrew Yang, of course, will also not be present, as he dropped out of the race following disappointing early results in the New Hampshire primary. In this video, I'll talk about what to expect from the Nevada debate, paying attention to each of the likely debate participants. I'll talk about what each candidate needs to do in order to score a win in the next debate, and answer the question, who's worth watching? This video is brought to you in part by viewers like you who support this channel through Patreon at patreon.com/questiontime. A big shout out to all the patrons, and shout out to new supporters Peter Georgakopoulos and THQ387. Let's begin with Michael Bloomberg. Bloomberg's potential inclusion in this debate was the subject of much controversy, and I went into this in depth in my last debate predictions video. To sum up, the DNC switched away from grassroots fundraising targets, which otherwise would have barred him from ever participating in the Democratic debates, as he is an exclusively self-funded campaign. Bloomberg, of course, is one of America's wealthiest people and has been fueling solid growth in the polls with massive ad spending. So far, he's spent $270 million on TV ads alone. In a sense, Bloomberg's bought his way onto the debate stage, and that's been sharply rebuked by many of his Democratic rivals. And yet there are valid reasons to support Bloomberg's inclusion in the debates at this stage. For one thing, he's currently polling in 3rd place according to RCP's nationwide polling aggregations. Along with Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg, who have scored victories in the first 2 primary contests, Bloomberg is surging in the polls. As a major competitor in the race, it seems reasonable that he be included in the debates. It's not just about whether Bloomberg deserves the attention and free media exposure. At this point, I believe the question is whether Democratic voters have a right to see how a real potential nominee handles himself in such a forum. Sure, inclusion in the debates is a kind of validation, and it provides the nominee with free media exposure. Sure, the rules were changed almost certainly to allow for his participation. But truth be told, he's perfectly able to pay for the media exposure on his own, and whether or not he's included on the debate stage will not make or break his legitimacy. When the 2nd place candidate is dropping as quickly as Biden is, it seems to me undemocratic to not include the 3rd highest polling candidate in the debate. And let me be totally clear here, I am not a Bloomberg supporter. He is quite literally the very last person in the Democratic primary contest who I would want to win. This is in part because of ideological differences, but for me, there is something far more fundamental at stake. I detest candidates who are funded primarily by wealthy donors because I believe that this corrupts the democratic process. If you owe your political career to the rich and powerful, you're likely to act in their interests above the interests of the American people. But if you are a billionaire or someone who owns a large corporation, and you self-fund your own political campaign, this in no way eliminates the corruption. It only makes the corruption more efficient. This is the exact argument, by the way, that I presented back during the 2016 election to challenge my fundamental issues with Trump's self-funded campaign. If both parties are captured by self-funded billionaires, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the United States has become a plutocracy. And yet, there is no sense in which excluding Bloomberg really hurts his campaign. Not including him allows him to continue to broadcast his ads without challenge. Including him means other candidates have a chance to challenge him on the debate stage, and there is plenty to criticize in his record and past statements. It also means his debate chops will become a factor in the success of his campaign. We know Bloomberg isn't going to lose the money game, but there is good reason to suspect that he might not be the most captivating public speaker. Here's a clip from his first speech as a presidential nominee.
Southeastern Virginia proves that with the right candidate, we can turn areas from red to blue. And we need to do that all across this country. And today I'm glad to announce that I am running for president to defeat Donald Trump and to unite and rebuild America. We cannot afford 4 more years of President Trump's reckless and unethical actions. He is an existential threat to our country, to our values, and our national security. And every day it seems to bring another example of just how unfit he is to serve as our president and commander-in-chief. And this week was no exception.
Exciting stuff. And here's a clip from the New York City mayoral general debate in 2009.
Mr. Bloomberg?
You know, you can't have it both ways. Bill has for 8 years in a row said that our plans, our financial plans, every time he's testified, are prudent and well thought out and appropriate. And now all of a sudden he's running for mayor and he wants to disavow that. We had to raise taxes when we wanted to preserve key services. And as soon as the economy got better, we reduced those taxes, and that's what we're going to do again. In the end, we have to grow our economy. You don't grow the economy by raising taxes on those whose jobs they're going to take out of the city.
Compared to the candidates that we've already seen on the debate stage, I find Bloomberg's public speaking skills to be somewhat lacking. He does not have a commanding voice. He blinks constantly, and he regularly stumbles over his own words. Even while his own campaign may be cheering for inclusion in the upcoming debates, so too should his more charismatic competitors, who have become adept at making their case on the presidential debate stage. If Bloomberg makes it on the debate stage, he's more than likely to take serious damage over recently leaked audio in which he essentially claims that most murderers are minorities.
95% of your murderers and murder victims fit one MO. You can just take the description, Xerox it, and pass it out to all the cops. They are male minorities, 15 to 25.
He'll also likely be taken to task over the more controversial aspects of his mayoral record, most especially his past support for stop and frisk policing. He is also likely to be criticized for buying his support from vocal opponents of billionaires controlling the political process, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. There have been many shifts taking place in the Democratic presidential race since the New Hampshire primary. But first among those changes is the fact that Bernie Sanders is now the undisputed frontrunner. He leads in all major polling aggregations. He leads when it comes to the betting odds averages. 538's odds also put him as more likely to win than any other candidate. When it comes to actual votes, Bernie secured the popular vote in both Iowa and New Hampshire. In terms of delegates, he is second only to Pete Buttigieg, who is expected to drop off going forward. Sanders also continues to lead in terms of numbers of donors and fundraising dollars. Only the self-funded billionaires have been able to best him in terms of total campaign cash. Sanders is also now the frontrunner in Nevada. He leads Biden in the RCP averages by 3 points. By 538's count, Sanders is ahead by 8 points. Clearly, Sanders will receive plenty of attacks from other candidates on the debate stage, as he did going into the Iowa caucus and New Hampshire primary, in both cases as the statewide frontrunner. Such attacks are likely only to help him, as Bernie Sanders tends to perform better in debates where he's put on the defensive. While Bernie typically avoids attacking other candidates, the senator has recently been more vocal about calling out other candidates for the donations they've received from billionaires. While he never really seemed to go after Steyer, who was both uncompetitive in the race and who often lavished praise on the senator, with Bloomberg we may see another story arise. Bloomberg is not shy about criticizing progressives, and Sanders is likely to go after him. Like Sanders, Pete Buttigieg is also currently coasting off of great results in the first 2 states. He's experienced significant gains in the polls and now stands in the lead when it comes to the delegate count. At the same time, there are limits to his momentum. Pete is projected to be somewhere between 3rd and 5th place in Nevada, polling around 10% at the time of this recording. He could very well do as well as hitting 2nd place in the popular vote if Biden continues to slide, but Nevada can be expected to be where his campaign starts to hit serious obstacles. Pete does best with white voters, and with its large Latino population, Pete may fail to net strong results. As a result, you're unlikely to see Pete facing as many attacks from the stronger candidates than, say, Bernie Sanders. You're also likely to see Pete attempt to turn things around for his support in the Latino community. He may even take a run at speaking Spanish again, if only Cory Booker were still here. As for Joe Biden, he has been facing crushing defeat after crushing defeat. The clear frontrunner throughout most of this race, Biden is now sliding into oblivion in the national polls. With Bloomberg focusing in on Super Tuesday, Biden's only real chance to reverse course is to make gains in Nevada and South Carolina. Biden set expectations low for the first two states, but he really can't get away with doing that anymore. Biden's once massive lead in South Carolina is even slipping away now, but to hold on to it, he's got to win Nevada first. In my estimation, Biden's got to win both of the next two states, or it's game over for his campaign. In order to recover, Biden has got to be a lot more aggressive in this debate. In past contests, he was able to coast by just avoiding taking damage. Now he's got to hit his moderate rivals where it hurts. Hammer Bloomberg and Buttigieg on their inexperience and poor relationships with minority communities. He also has to go well beyond his Obama name drops to articulate and explain specific policy victories he's had in terms of serving the Latino and Black communities. As for Amy Klobuchar, she has been doing surprisingly well in the race so far, a solid third place behind Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders in terms of delegates. While she's generated some late momentum in Nevada, it's really not enough to put her into serious contention even for second place. Sure, Klobuchar has been doing better in the polls, in part fueled by generally improved debate performances, but it's hard to see how she's got a realistic shot of beating out the other moderate candidates without a game-changing move. Klobuchar needs to take some serious risks in this debate. A good performance is not enough, unless of course she's running for vice president. It's essentially the same deal for Elizabeth Warren. She needs to make big changes as her campaign has rolled off into a ditch. In the last debate, Warren did a poor job of standing out amongst a highly energized field and used one of her most recognizable stump speeches multiple times in the single debate. She's got to do better than a flat performance this time around and go on the offense. In some sense, Warren has already been making some changes in her campaign strategy. Most notably, she's begun to regularly criticize progressive rival Bernie Sanders and praise Amy Klobuchar. But the gambit has so far failed to pay off. Warren's fallen behind in the delegate count, and as Sanders takes off in the polls, much of those new Bernie supporters seem to be drawn from Warren's campaign. The once popular candidate is polling poorly in Nevada and nationwide. As it now stands, she'd be lucky to win her home state of Massachusetts on Super Tuesday. In truth, even with a perfect debate performance, it's difficult to see a path to victory for Warren's campaign at this point. She should probably at this point be considering the question of dropping out. Her best chance of taking up residence in the White House next year would probably be to endorse Bernie Sanders in exchange for a spot on his ticket, if that offer is still on the table, as it almost certainly was in early days of the primary race. So while Warren's campaign should probably be considering this question, it's doubtful that she's still a good answer to this one.
Most people have never heard of Andrew Yang, and I'm already polling at 1%, enough for me to make the debates.
We need to get the money out of D.C. and into your hands, the hands of the American people. This is the move that we have to make, particularly as technology is now automating away millions of American jobs. It's why Donald Trump is our president today.
Donald Trump is not the cause of all of our problems.
That we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. And we're about to do the same thing to millions of retail jobs, call center jobs, fast food jobs, truck driving jobs, and on through the economy.
He is a symptom of a disease that has been building up in our communities for years. We must cure the disease that got him elected. And in order to do that, we must address the real problems that affect our people and offer solutions to actually solve them.
The 5 most common jobs in the United States right now are administrative and clerical work, retail and sales, food service and food prep, truck driving and transportation and manufacturing. Those 5 jobs comprise about half of all American jobs. And if you look at it, technology is already doing a number on each of these jobs.
Fewer than 5% of Americans donate to political campaigns. You know what you need to donate to political campaigns? Disposable income. So what we have to do is we have to get into the roots of our communities and create paths forward for men in particular who right now are falling through the cracks. And when you look at gun violence in this country, 96+% of the shooters we're talking about are young boys and young men. We have to, as a country, start finding ways to turn our boys into healthy, strong young men who do not hate, but instead feel like they have paths forward in today's economy.
I have a 6 and 3-year-old boy. I was imagining it was one of them that got shot, and the other saw it.
There are only 2 countries in the world that don't have paid family leave for new moms: the United States of America and Papua New Guinea. That is the entire list, and we need to get off this list as soon as possible.
If you win the 2020 election, what would you say in your first call with Russian President Vladimir Putin?
It's a fun moment. Well, first I'd say, I'm sorry I beat your guy.
Mr. Yang.
I know what you're thinking, America. How am I still on this stage with them?
You know, I am the math guy, and it is clear tonight from the numbers that we are not going to win this race. I am not someone who wants to accept donations and support in a race that we will not win. And so tonight, I am announcing I am suspending my campaign for president. This is just the starting line. This campaign has awakened something fundamental in this country and ourselves.
Thanks, Andrew. No problem.